Okay, we're now recording and getting started. I wanted to welcome everybody here. You can see those of you who can see the chat. We have people from a lot of different groups, institutions, and so on here today. Quite the diverse spread. And I wanted to welcome everyone. On behalf of myself, I'm Chris Sellers. I'm a professor of environmental history and studies at Stony Brook University, and also co-founder and project lead at the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative. And I'm joined and speaking to you today at this workshop by Elena Saxonhouse, who's a senior lawyer on the Sierra Club's legal team, and who led a FOIA coordinating group over the last few years, involving many groups, other groups, and by Merlin Chauquanian, who is the chief architect of Toxic Docs, which is a website and digital collection he'll describe a little, and who teaches at the Columbia School of Public Health. And we're very pleased today to announce this, the release of this new tool we've been building. It's a collaboration between EDGI, Toxic Docs, and Sierra Club and other contributing groups to make public thousands of FOIA documents received during the Trump years from the federal government. I wanted to thank all those who made this possible. Besides Merlin and Elena, they're sort of foremost in my thanks. But my colleagues at EDGI also have supported this project, and especially the people at People's EPA, our website, which is also a portal into the repository. That would be Leif Fredrickson and Jess Varner. Also others in the FOIA coordinating group, including those who have already contributed documents and those to come, and the several assistants who worked with Merlin to prepare and mount some of these thousands of documents that are now available. Let me just begin with a little, I'm an historian, so an origin story for the repository here briefly, for at least from the perspective of those of us at EDGI. The idea for this repository first emerged in early 2017. This is when EDGI itself was first forming, and we got a lot of our early sort of focus in trying to save documents. Documents and data we were worried the Trump administration would destroy or erase. But we also got wind of this FOIA coordinating group that Elena was organizing, and with a view to coordinating more of the many FOIA requests that they anticipated they would be putting into this incoming administration, which seemed, on the face of it, so hostile to much of the environmental agenda that people had been supporting. So we got into that group and contributed a little bit along the way, basically keeping records of the many requests that were being put in. But I think we did initially have the idea that maybe someday we would pull all this together into one big searchable public database. And so for us, that was kind of the origin. We did, as the years wore on, and we also, the successful FOIAs mounted up, we reached out to Merlin and the folks at Toxic Docs, who had already developed a database. Merlin will describe it a little bit, as well as a search engine as a possible vehicle for containing all those FOIA documents. And the project took off from there. We first opened it to the public, I guess, on the 50th anniversary of the EPA in late 2020. But we've now added a slew of other documents and are also We'll be having most of the Sierra Club collection up there in the next while. So we wanted to take this occasion to let people know that it's there and let them to experiment a little bit with all that it's going to be able to do. We've gained, I think, a heightened appreciation in the process here of the need for this kind of collection. I mean, FOIA is this powerful tool ever since 1967, 72. It aided the public to know more about what our government is up to. And as wielded by journalists, as activists and researchers, it's enabled us to know the extent to which they're acting in the interest of our democracy of, for, and by the people versus moneyed and private interests. But FOIA itself has some issues. It works by request. And so rather than automatically, people have to request the information, take that initiative. It takes time and skill to make it work. And so that automatically means that it's not that available to many members of the public. Groups have to devote teams to really making FOIA work. It requires legal skill as well as time and effort. And I think as government has switched from a print to a digital format, other complications have arisen. The potential has risen for making this information accessible and usable and searchable. But at the same time, a gap has grown between the spirit of FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, and the letter of the law, when you only have to just put up a long URL to release things to the public, and nobody knows where it is or has ever seen it and can't find it. That meets the letter of the law, but not really the spirit of the law. And so we're trying to step into that gap with this FOIA repository to do what the federal government has not really done, which is to make it not just accessible to request by request in this kind of proprietary fashion, but actually create a database that contains many of these requests, many of these documents, and that is keyword searchable, and that you can dive right in and begin to research and find what you're interested in looking for. These questions, I think that the need has become ever more apparent with the Trump administration too, where we've had an administration that is trying to turn the government, many of us saw, away from the public interest toward the interest of the regulated community. So that, I think, has accentuated our need to do this, our feeling that it's an important project to undertake. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elena, who'll tell us a little bit about her perspective of getting into this and what it means from Sierra Club's end.
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, as Chris mentioned, we started this FOIA coordination group back in early 2017 when we and other Sierra Club and other organizations were ramping up their FOIA work to try to hold the Trump administration accountable. And there was just a lot more interest then in coming together and coordinating, comparing notes, both between environmental groups and kind of open government transparency groups. And one of the first things that came up was, how are we getting all these documents out to the public? Sierra Club has a lot of, kind of machinery to get the word out to the public and post documents, but not every group does. And even for big groups like Sierra Club, it's not easy to share documents in a very usable format. We use discovery software to review it internally, and that works well, but that's expensive. It requires training. It's not something that we can kind of just have any reporter or researcher log into. And so in the past, our approach has been to basically share box.com links with, hundreds of PDFs from a case, and each individual one might be searchable, but there's no way to kind of search across them. And we do often get inquiries from reporters or people working on the Hill or academics, oh, does your trove of documents have, this, talk about this person or this toxic chemical or whatever it is. And we've tried to accommodate some, where we're able by like doing the search internally. But that's not really sustainable or something we have a lot of staff capacity for. So, from the beginning, everybody saw the need for this kind of public database, and I'm very excited that we now are going to have this kind of searchable repository so anybody can dig in. So now let me say a little bit about what's in here and what will be in the database soon. And I'm going to talk about Sierra Club's documents, but I know that there's other groups that have contributed as well. So this certainly doesn't cover kind of everything that is or will be in the database. So our FOIA requests in the Trump era focused mostly on external communications between political appointees and their administrative staff and industry and other anti-regulation kind of representatives. And, we kind of focused on the people that we knew had these industry ties or ties to other groups that really opposed any sort of environmental regulation. And we mostly, we focused first on Scott Pruitt at EPA and Ryan Zinke at Interior, but also there were just dozens of other staff whose communications we targeted at those two agencies. And then we did have some other more narrow FOIAs to the Department of Energy, the Security and Exchange Commission, and other agencies. They just weren't as sort of sweeping and comprehensive as some of the ones to EPA and Interior were. And, so we've gotten just tens of thousands of documents. And I think people are pretty aware of all the kind of juicy scandals that came out about Scott Pruitt. But beyond that, there wasn't anything quite as, kind of the kind of thing that made headlines. But I think, certainly if you're researching a particular policy issue or a particular character in the lobbying world, there would be documents that could be very interesting and have not really been dug into yet. And there's other things where it might not have seemed newsworthy at the time, but now more information has come out that makes some of these documents seem more interesting. Like I know that the Republican Attorney General's Association pops up a lot in these external communications. I think much more recently than when we got these documents, it came out that this is one of these organizations that was supporting the January 6th riots. So there's things like that there may be kind of some newfound interest in. And then I guess just some other examples of what we have. We have a lot of documents from Nancy Beck, who ran the chemicals office, that I don't think many people have dug into. There are documents we've been receiving more recently that are communications from Ryan Jackson, Pruitt's chief of staff, that nobody's really looked at. We've looked at them, but I don't think anybody externally really has. Those were sort of the ones where we just had longer timelines in terms of getting them out of EPA. And so really getting most of those documents after, after Trump was actually gone. So there's other documents from some of the folks at Interior who were trying to dismantle the Endangered Species Act, and a lot on the reorganization of that agency, Interior, to have its headquarters move and things like that. So there's, and there's just thousands of documents. So I'm speaking just to a small portion of what's there. So we just sent over like a big tranche to Maryland, and so those are going to be coming up shortly. So they might not all be there when you kind of poke around with it today, but there will be hopefully a complete set before too long. And we are, planning to continue contributing to this project with the additional FOIA work that we're doing. We're still doing FOIA work beyond the Trump administration. We have FOIA pending on the Postal Service's decision not to electrify its fleet of delivery trucks. And, there's other things that we're still working on. And yeah, so, we worked very hard to get all these documents. I really hope they can be of use to people and not just gather, I guess, virtual dust. And so, yeah, I'm very excited that this tool makes it more possible for people to access and really find the interesting nuggets in these documents. So I'll pass it over to Merlin now for the demo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending. I'm in Bangkok, Thailand, visiting my 100-year-old grandmother. So I apologize for wearing a t-shirt. I just kind of ran to pack and didn't pack something a little slightly more formal, but here I am. So yeah, Chris and Elena gave some excellent expositions. I'll recap some of it, but then get to the heart of it, which is this database. And before I do that, let me just set a timer. I don't want to be that guy. There we go. So Chris talked about this thing called Toxic Docs. It's an actual website. You can go to it right now. I'll just type the URL here. Toxic Docs, that stands for toxic documents, not toxic doctors. There are toxic doctors out there, and there should be documents about them so you can learn about what they've done, but that's not what we're about. We're about toxic documents about toxic substances. And we are, I think, the largest database of our kind. Let me just share the screen right now. Forgot to do that. There we go. Do you all see the screen? Give it a thumbs up. Awesome. So here's what you see when you go to Toxic Docs. I think Elena used the term discovery. I think most of us probably know what this is, but if you don't, this is the phase in a lawsuit where both sides are basically required to open up their vaults and what's in their attic and so forth. And I think most famously, this occurred in the tobacco trials of the 1990s when Philip Morris and all these other giants had to basically open up their archives, and we found out all sorts of things they knew about the addictive properties of cigarettes. And those documents actually were a key part of the success of those cases. Well, tobacco and cigarettes, those aren't the only cases where this happens. Asbestos, lead, PCBs, polyvinyl chloride, benzene, you name it. There are lots of active, there's a lot of active ongoing toxic torts litigation. And from the perspective of a journalist, a researcher, an environmental health advocate, these cases are amazing, no matter how they end, because the discovery process opens up all these materials. So in this database, we have stuff that nobody has ever seen from Monsanto, from British Petroleum, from Texaco, from you name any industrial giant, we probably got something on it, General Motors, etc. The problem is that even though discovery material is technically public record, it's not like there's this beautiful room that anybody can just go to and you say, give me the documents from that Monsanto case, and they'll sit you down in a chair and you can look at them comfortably in a nice space. No, like you have to depend on the goodness of one of the two sides in the case, either the defendants or the plaintiffs. As you can imagine, we don't have much goodwill with the defendants. If we go to Monsanto and we say, hey, we heard you got sued, would you mind showing us some of the documents that came out in the case? The reaction is usually one of hostility and the door slammed in our face. But we do have some relationships with plaintiff firms. My colleagues, David Rosner and Jerry Markowitz, who teach at Columbia and the City University of New York, have written a lot of books on these topics and are expert witnesses in some of these cases. And so they have actually access to a lot of the material that comes out during these cases. And so that's given us an entry point into a much wider network of plaintiff firms, which we've kind of leveraged to get a lot of this material online. So even though it's not a physical room where you can sit and look at the stuff, it's a virtual room where you can sit and look at that stuff. So that's one problem, one thing that Toxic Docs solved. The other thing was a technical challenge, though. So just because there's lots of documents available and just because a plaintiff firm gives them to you, it doesn't mean it's easy to actually search through it. Elena mentioned this before, and a lot of the software to look through this stuff is really slow and clunky. It's also the case that a lot of the material, when it comes to us, isn't machine readable. So that is the text. We have a picture of a document, but you can't actually search through it. So you have to use this thing called optical character recognition technology, where it looks through a page and then it realizes, oh, that's the letter G, and I'll convert it into a letter G so that you can copy paste it and search for it and whatever. And that used to take a long time. So in like the year 2000, even, if this project would have been impossible, we would have had to rent extremely expensive supercomputers to do optical character recognition on like 25 million pages, or we could try to do it on like a personal computer, but personal computers are really not designed for this amount of volume. So we had one of our first batches of documents was 4 million pages. When I first tried that on Adobe Acrobat Pro, just converting it using the optical character recognition, I think like my computer passed out at like the 3,000 page mark or something like that. But the technology has just improved immeasurably in the past 20 years or so. And so now we actually don't have to depend on crummy little laptops or super expensive supercomputers. So one of the things we do when we get a batch of documents like the ones that Elena sent to us is in order to do the optical character recognition process, we throw it into this giant national computer grid that a lot of academic institutions are a part of. And basically what this lets you do is you toss in, I don't know, 1 million pages or something, and then you parcel the 1 million pages out in these supercomputer clusters that are all over the country. And so something that might have taken 6 months to do 20 years ago takes like 6 hours to do in the year 2022. So that's one thing that's been pretty awesome. And we have the thing right here. One of the things we're really proud of is the speed of the interface. So you type in something like water and you get stuff really quickly. My hometown of Los Angeles, boom, 17,000 documents related to Los Angeles. And that's something, we spent 6 months doing nothing but tests to make sure that people, one of the most frustrating things if you do document retrieval is sitting there for 10 seconds with like a spinning wheel or an hourglass. We didn't want that. So speed has been a priority for Toxic Docs. So Chris mentioned we got together at some point. So Toxic Docs humming along, we were adding more material, etc. And Edgy was doing its really important work on preserving the EPA's websites as the Trump administration was trying to destroy the contents. And so we had this like perfect complementarity. We were doing kind of separate things, but they were very aligned. And so when the FOIA consortium that Elena spearheaded started working with Edgy, but they needed a place to store the material, everything kind of fit together. And so that's how we got together. Toxic Docs, we've always been interested in transparency issues. We sometimes will get threatening letters from like, Monsanto saying, you better take this document down. And they invoke all kinds of laws to try to do that. They have not been successful ultimately, but those kinds of encounters get me thinking a lot about how firms try to stifle the release of material, try to keep stuff on paper from ever seeing the light of day. So I thought about FOIA as another mechanism of transparency. And there's this project that some of you may know about that I'd always looked to as a potential model. It's called the National Security Archive. You can see it on my screen right now. This is a project that has filed Freedom of Information Act requests to mostly the State Department and the Department of Defense about foreign policy. And they've uncovered so many things about American foreign policy that we didn't know. So one of the conflicts that I'm very passionate about is the American engagement in East Timor, the small country very close to Indonesia. A lot of what we know about atrocities in East Timor comes from the National Security Archive. So, I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a National Security Archive for like environmental stuff? And one of the lawyers who Chris has worked with very closely and who is part of EDGI, named Sarah Lambden, who is like a FOIA guru, she also had the same idea. She wanted to kind of do like something, I think she was calling the Green FOIA website or something like that. So we always had, it was just a lot of pieces that kind of converged and came together. So one thing we decided to do is create a separate portal for the EDGI material, and you can get to it by going to edgyfoia.toxicdocs.org. Seems like I can't get to the chat if I'm sharing the screen, but I'll pop it in later. But you should be able to see the URL up there. And we might go grab edgyfoia.org or something at some point. But this lets you basically just search the EDGI document so that when you type material here, you don't get all this other stuff from Toxic Docs. You only get the EDGI documents. And I'll just type climate change right here. Let's see what happens. 1,300 results on climate change and the various things that the Trump administration was doing there. A lot of it was trying to undermine the Clean Power Plan and things that happened in the Obama administration. So you can just kind of type in names. When Elena was talking about Nancy Beck, I typed in Nancy Beck, found 100 documents, mostly emails that Nancy Beck sent out. So, if Nancy Beck is someone you have your eye on, well, here you have 100 emails that you can go read. So right now, the key way to attack the data set is keyword searches, typing phrases, typing names you might know, and things like that. But this has been an issue with Toxic Docs too. At some point, just typing keywords can become laborious, especially if you don't know what the keywords are. And so this is a separate tool that we're developing, and it will be, we've already kind of soft launched it, and I think we're ready to actually fully launch it. You can go to the site toxicdocs.tools, toxicdocs.tools. And what it allows you to do is pick something like the EDGI documents. You hit a button, you wait a little bit, and then it pries out a list of common people, places, states, and organizations. So I'm kind of just scrolling through here right now. So, if you have never approached this database before, you don't know a lot about the goings on in the Trump administration, boom, now you have a list of people who you can pursue with this tool. We're also developing tools that'll look at correspondence networks. So if Samantha Dravis and Ryan Jackson write a lot to each other, presumably that could be an interesting network connection. We'll have an email extractor. This is actually the first set of documents that we have with a ton of emails. In fact, I think the majority of these documents might actually be email. So we'll allow you to kind of just pry out an email address and then get all the documents associated with that. So that's basically the future, but I'm excited to see this continue to grow. As Elena said, there's another chunk of stuff that's going to be put on very shortly. And one thing about FOIA that Chris mentioned is a lot of bottlenecks in terms of filing these requests and persistence. I filed a few FOIA requests in my day. A lot of times they're denied, and I don't try again. Like I'm dispirited, and I'm like, I don't have time to do this. I just toss it aside. And it turns out this is actually the majority experience for most people who file FOIA requests. They get denied, and the majority of them are never actually appealed. So one of the cool things about this project is we now have people at EDGI like Sarah Lambden and who can actually help us be a little more persistent about FOIA requests and how to kind of, be the battering ram when you get denied the first time and things like that. So we're going to continue doing that as well. So some technical stuff in the future and some non-technical stuff And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I'd be really interested in hearing other people's ideas for cool tools and stuff. Like when we design tools, one of the things we do is just sit around the table and say, okay, what would a cool tool be? What would be something that would be useful? Like forget if it's technically feasible. Let's just come up with the tool. And so we write the tool down and then we try to implement something approximating it. So I'd love to hear what people will be interested in on that score too. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. We've talked a lot now, but we're really eager to hear your comments, your questions, your sort of suggestions. And I've also put the links to there's one portal through a People's EPA, which is sort of a more general website on EPA, and then the direct link is also there at Toxic Dogs. So you should be able to get in there and maybe do a little exploring now. And we're here to answer any question about that as well. But we're also eager to get more people in groups on board with this. So we're eager to hear what you all might want to say, add, ask, and so on. You can just raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat as you prefer.
Chris, maybe while we're waiting for people to collect their thoughts, I was just going to add, and just in case anyone joined late, just to emphasize that I think what's up there, there will probably eventually be like 10 times more stuff that will be there, and so results that you're finding now, would not be the sum total of what you would find. Maybe in a couple of weeks. So just want to flag that.
And we're also looking to ramp it up still further we've got a funder interested now in hiring some people to really get this thing to another level of documents and into the millions, we hope.
I have one question, and sorry if you mentioned this already, Merlin, but I think in a previous demo, was there a way to kind of flag and keep documents or something that kind of sets some aside?
Great question. Answer is yes. And your question, I think, is very similar to Hayden's in the chat. So yes, absolutely. So if there's these two buttons that say login and sign up, very easy, you type your email, you make up a password, and then boom, you got an account that you can use every time. And as you go on the site, here, I'll show you. Actually, I forgot my password to the site, so I can't show you. But there's these little things on when you type in, California or whatever, you see a bunch of documents. There's like a bookmark icon. It looks like it looks like columns, and then there's like a kind of triangular shape at the bottom. All you do is hit boom, bookmark, and then that document appears in like a book bag. And so you, as you're going through on a first pass, one of the things I do is, I rapidly kind of look through. I look for 3 seconds. I go, okay, that could be interesting. Boom, bookmark, and then you toss it in the bag. And so that's definitely a good feature. So you don't have to sit there and one by one, download stuff and interrupt your flow, I guess. So yes, definitely and that's what the thing Hayden is asked for. And so Hayden, no, you don't actually have to sign up or log in to use the site. But if you want to use the bookmark feature, you have to, because, if I'm on the site and I haven't signed in, it has no way of knowing that my bookmarks are not Chris's bookmarks, are not Elena's bookmarks, etc.
There's another question here from Allison Cole about plans to gather documents together into collections.
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit, I understand that's like, I guess like a subject matter sort of expertise or interest and a lot of heavy lifting, but, I didn't know if, to help researchers newer to a topic, get a fuller context. So like clean power plant discussions, collection, and key documents that subject matter expert might pull out to get folks started.
So aside from the keyword searches, having actual document collections by topic, I mean, I think you can search it by source, as I understand it. That is, this is the Sierra Club collection, this is American Oversight, and so on. But
yeah, I think this would take a while, and a lot of might not be the goal at all, but I put an example of a site that's not as
oh yeah, sure, I've seen.
searchable necessarily, and then I think has a limited collection, but within that they're just sort of here are these introductory even docs on the topic, but that might not be a goal of the project.
No, Allison, that is definitely a goal of the project, and I'm gonna jot that down as a very important high priority suggestion. It's something that has also been an issue with toxic docs. We have the world's largest collection on there about of asbestos documents, but there are so many components of asbestos, different derivations of asbestos, and so forth. And so looking at this giant dog pile of documents on asbestos can be overwhelming. And so one of the things that one might want to do is exactly as you say, cluster it by more specific subject matter. So there are kind of two solutions to this. One is old school and one is new school. So the old school solution is if the documents come to us and somebody says, these are documents about asbestos in, I don't know, car brakes or something like that. We can actually flag them as car brakes and then separate them onto a wing of the site so that only people who are interested in car brakes can look at that stuff. And we can actually do that to some extent. Elena can speak more to this, but as she noted, the FOIA requests are about sometimes very specific subject matter. So we can certainly do that in an old school way. The trade-off is if you start making too many demarcations, then you could eventually get a list very quickly of 500 different subsets of documents. So it's a balance between having the one giant pile that's too big versus too many subsets. But that's an excellent, I think we can find a happy medium between those two. The new school technique is to use some exciting new developments in natural language processing where we can have a computer essentially find clusters of documents that might relate to each other because the same phrase or the same person shows up. And we're experimenting with things like that right now. It's just kind of clusters of documents. And so that might be one way around it. Too. So definitely stay tuned. But I'm glad you raised that because this is definitely something that would improve user experience. And thank you for the suggestion.
Sure. And yeah, I understand what you mean about the new school project. I had access to doc3 software that could do that, but never got to see it work. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
It's sometimes it works really well. Sometimes the results are kind of absurd. It'll see the same word and assume, or the same collection of same phrases and assume the things are similar, but they're not. So it's close to prime time, but not quite prime time. So we're experimenting as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions, suggestions?
Chris, maybe you can say more about this, but I know one of our ideas too is even though there's so much Trump stuff to go through, we do eventually want to kind of go to other agencies besides EPA and other administrations even. Chris and I, our day jobs, were historians, and anyone who has been to the National Archives and looked at the EPA record group knows that it is not exactly high on the National Archives priorities. And so sometimes, sadly, creating your own archive from FOIA is a better archive than the actual EPA archive at the National Archives in terms of really practically being able to find stuff. So I don't know, Chris, do you think that's in the cards in the future, like an Obama collection, a George
Yeah,
Bush Jr.?
I think so. I think, I've looked a little bit at FOIA online, which does accumulate, for instance, all the EPA, although Department of Interior, you have to go separately to Department of Interior. A lot of the EPA, as well as some other agencies, post their FOIAs in what's was supposed to be a central online repository, but it's voluntary for the agencies. And that goes back into the Obama years to 2013, I think was the earliest entry I found there for the EPA. So we would welcome other groups contributing their FOIAs, all of you from groups that do that. And so, write us. I think there's been so much stuff, so many requests that have been out there that I know have gotten some response that from the last few years, that I think we'd like to build out that collection, that part of the collection. But yeah, I think that will be more sort of our initiative to figure out how to just go in directly to FOIA Online. If we get this grant from the funder, we'll probably be looking at getting more systematic about FOIA Online and getting the documents off that. And then also have discussions about, I think it's going to also depend on this question of collections, and if there are particular topics that we feel are important to dive into first versus next. I think that's kind of connected to Allison's question about particular collections that we might want to pursue first versus later. I think climate is one of the obvious places to look. And other agencies, certainly. I mean, we already have not just EPA, but Interior from the Sierra Club. And I think some of the Wilderness Society is also Interior. And of course, there are lots of other federal agencies too that get involved in environmental things. So looking at only some of which are on FOIA Online. So we're looking to along all these fronts to expand, especially as we get some staff and a manager and so on to really work on this more full time in the next few months. We're hopeful.
Yeah, and as I'm sure Elena especially knows, a lot of the worst kind of mischief happens at state level with state level regulatory agencies, which have even less of a commitment to electronic transparency. So that's another avenue I've thought of as well.
And Sarah Lambden has already done some digging into that too. It's our colleague at EDGI, Sarah Lambden. She has had some classes exploring that and gathering documents. So that's another, I mean, that would be a whole nother sort of, Merlin would have to figure out the portal system and vision of the federal versus the state and all that kind of thing. But that's certainly, a wide open and promising way to expand too.
One of the things I found pretty interesting about looking at the material as a whole versus just reading about a set of documents in, like some of the high-profile stories that surfaced around Pruitt and the subsequent EPA director was when you actually see it as a whole, you really do sort of see how they use bureaucracy and weaponize it. So there's a number of documents where people in the administration are polling other or surveying other agencies to see if there is any climate change plan in action and what it is exactly. And I think the implication is that they're trying to see what can be done to put the brakes on such things. And it's hard to see that kind of thing unless you see the thing as a whole. It's also sort of tedious to read because a lot of it just on the surface seems like, very routine, rote administrative emails. And so it's in some ways a challenging set of documents to use, but I think if you read long enough, you start to see what exactly a seemingly mundane memo to the Bureau of Land Management is really about.
And I would just add I think we initially thought that some of the, interesting emails would come from the higher level people, but it turns out that they're not on their email that much. And so you really have to find out who the administrative folks are and who are making the scheduling, appointments and things like that. And kind of, 1 or 2 levels down from the administrator, 1 or 2 or 3 levels down from the administrator, their communications can be really interesting.
That's where the contacts between the politicals and the career people happen. I guess that was where a lot of the friction that we picked up in the Trump years were it unfolded. So we also, as part of this, we're also looking to create this public environmental archive, of which this is a part. And so it also includes the interview series that we did with EPA folks over the Trump years, and really reflective too of the comparison with Obama and Trump and further on back too. We have a whole series of 140 interviews that we did that we're going to be also putting up on that People's EPA website, which has that portal to toxic docs and so on. And we're also going to be putting up databases there of some runs of EPA documents, keyword searchable on environmental justice and that kind of thing, including to make those more accessible. Some of these are publicly available elsewhere, but to have one place to pool a lot of this documentary material, as well as the FOIAs and so on. So looks like we have a couple of comments. Sort of a late question. Looks like EPA is pushing the EPA archive, the online archive. Yeah, yes, that's true. Edgy was and Sierra joined this too. We helped put together this big push with a lot of historian groups as well as the green and open government groups to, once we got wind that the EPA was getting rid of its online archive, going to shut it down. And this month, it was July, we pushed back. They had not made, this is how things work in the digital realm. Digital things for these agencies seem to be entirely disposable. And so they just say, oh, we're going to get it back to the National Archives. But of course, that means, they shut down the digital access, the digital archive. That means that we have to wait until NARA processes everything. And, it's kind of lost in a sort of, lost to the public, really, for multiple years on out before you can actually get a hold of it, if they do get rid of this online archive. So we got a lot of groups interested in pushing back, and we did get the agency to delay its termination of the online archive at least till 2023. But we'd actually like to see EPA have that be a model. We'd actually like to see EPA and the other federal agencies actually do this, to create these archives themselves, because it's about accessibility. It's about sort of their obligation to the public to use the latest technology to really make it more accessible, rather than just this literal, baseline level of accessibility that they're stuck on. So, but in absence of that, we don't see much sign that's happening. We do want to create eventually some more pressure to get them to do more of this themselves in the agencies, but you know, we don't see that happening anytime soon. And so now is the time actually to formulate a model. This is what we see this initiative as, a model that perhaps the government at some point can take up and run with. I mean, when it decides that it really wants to make its inner workings accessible, that we'll have shown them how. Who would be the best person to reach out? A FOIA response you want to visit? So I think that would be the contact people would be Merlin and me. Just we like to have double contact so things don't get lost, but just write us an email. Maybe we could put our emails in here, Merlin. And
yeah, we have separate emails, and then we have this one email that goes to both of us. It's intake@toxicdocs.org.
oh, that's right. You want to put that in there?
Yeah. If that doesn't work, it's because I'm jet lagged and forgot the email, but it's something like that. But yeah, just try the other one, my actual email, and you know, I'll give you the generic one.
Yeah, so we'd welcome that. I believe Robin is Earth Justice, right? That's great.
Yeah, I'm with Earth Justice. That's right. Mhm.
I know you guys have so many of these you put in. That would be wonderful to get your collection in there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll keep those. I'll write down those emails.
And yeah, anyone else? We just you know, look us up, get these emails, and I think you can see the emails in the. We'll send out a final. We'll send out a sort of wrap up email to everybody who's on the participant list, and inviting people to if you do have FOIAs you'd like to contribute to let us know. Okay. Any concluding comments, you all, Elena or Merlin? Like thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I just really appreciate the work that you all are doing. And like I said earlier, just really happy to be able to get these out of Sierra Club computers and into the world.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. Yeah, I think FOIA, for all the things we've learned about it, is actually a pretty underutilized tool and can be pretty intimidating. So, and a lot of the fruits of it are not actually widely disseminated beyond the immediate purpose of the FOIA request, whatever it is. So, you know, I hope stuff like this becomes more commonplace.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending. And also we look forward to your use, and you know, just reach out to us if you use it and you have comments or questions or anything. I mean, we're there, we're available. You have our emails. We'll also be sending out that final email to everyone who's here, that whose email we have. And we look forward to working with you all to really building this thing out, and you know, using the fruits of the FOIA potential, bringing it to fruition through this kind of tool. Okay, thanks for attending,
everybody.
and we'll see you soon, I hope.